Call meeting to order. Those who care to, please stand for an opening prayer and pledge of allegiance. Mr. Cameron, if you will.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day, and Lord, thank you for all that you do for us. And Lord, just pray, God, that you would guide and direct us in all that we do and all that we say tonight. Lord, I just pray that you would continue to pour out your favor upon our city and just guide and provide us wisdom in all that we do and say. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we will open up tonight with some appointments, or requests for appointments, and we will just do these all together. It is for the EEZ board, the Enhanced Enterprise Zone board. So I am asking tonight for Chance Wistrom, Harold Bench, and Mike White to all be reappointed to that EEZ board for a term expiring 7/8 of 2024. To do that, I would ask for a motion and a second.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Next, moving on to citizen participation. Anyone wishing to speak to anything not on the agenda, please step to the podium. State your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes. Anyone wishing to speak to anything not on the agenda? Seeing none, citizen participation is closed. I need a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries 8-0. On to boards, commission, committee schedule. Of note, city council meeting will be July 23rd, 2019, followed by August 20th, 2019, and the next planning and zoning meeting will be here August 12th, 2019, here at City Hall. Excuse me. On to old business and tabled items, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of bill number 19-09.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Laura.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending the zoning code and official map by changing the classification of approximately 9.1 acres located at the 7,000 block of West Farm Road 174 from agricultural to 12 Stones Plan Development District.
Thank you. I need a motion and a second for final passage of bill number 19-09.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. We have Ms. Haynes at the podium. We had a presentation on this at the last meeting. And I would ask if anyone from the council has any questions, comments, or concerns before we move on to a roll call vote. Okay, seeing none, roll call vote.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin?
Aye.
Councilmember Poole?
Aye.
Councilmember Bashirs?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Self?
Aye.
Councilmember Dykeman?
Aye.
That motion carries 8-0. Okay, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of bill number 19-10.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Laura.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending the zoning code and official map by changing the classification of approximately 5.75 acres located at Old Stone Road from Old Stone PDD to Fieldstone PDD.
Thank you. I need a motion and a second for final passage of bill number 19-10.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Again, we have Ms. Haynes at the podium. If there are any questions, comments, or concerns based on the presentation given at the last council meeting. Okay, seeing none, roll call vote.
Councilmember Wilson? Councilmember Dykeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Bashirs?
Aye.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Self?
Aye.
Councilmember Poole?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin?
Aye.
That motion carries 8-0 as well. Ms. Haynes, it appears you're going to be there for a while now, so just get comfortable. Okay, moving on to new business. First reads, I need a motion and a second for the first reading of bill number 19-11.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Laura.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, approving a special use permit amendment to ordinance 16-19, section 2.b, increasing the maximum building square footage for Dynamic Strides, a farm-based aquatic and therapy center located at 2673 East Sawyer Road.
Thank you. Ms. Haynes.
The request tonight comes from 156 Corner LLC, or Dynamic Strides. Again, they are requesting an amendment to the original special use permit and allow for a farm-based clinic geared towards children located at East Sawyer Road. The property subject to the special use permit application is approximately 80 acres. The property currently contains a residential structure, an agricultural accessory structure, and then the farm-based clinic for children known as Dynamic Strides. The owner is requesting this special use amendment to increase the maximum square footage that was originally permitted in the original special use permit. That maximum was 30,000 square feet. They're asking to increase that by 1,500 square feet to a total of 31,500. The increase in square footage for the clinic will allow for an expansion of the current facilities. This expansion will be comprised of approximately 7,200 square feet to the existing structure. The proposed expansion will include a multi-purpose room, several treatment facility rooms, offices, restrooms, changing rooms, and a swimming pool for aquatic therapy. Staff has reviewed the amendment application, and we are recommending approval of the special use permit amendment.
Thank you. Any discussion from council? Mr. Russell?
I hesitate to ask because you probably said it and I just missed it. Why is this a special use permit?
Originally, when they applied for the permit, a farm-based clinic geared towards children wasn't an allowable use in the zoning district, so a special use permit was the method to allow for a very specific use. The special use permit ordinance allows for very defined uses in particular zoning districts. So this one defines all of the activities and facilities that could occur on that 80-acre parcel.
I see.
Any other discussion from council? Okay, seeing none, remember this is the first read. If you have any questions before the next meeting, please get with Ms. Haynes. Moving on to Bill number 19-12, that has been withdrawn and removed from the agenda at the request of the applicant. So we'll move on to a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill number 19-13.
Motion.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Laura?
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, approving amending the zoning code and official map by changing the classification of approximately 1.31 acres from general commercial C2 to medium-density single-family residential R1-M, owned by Sergey and Aya Pachenko, located at 3455 East Benton.
Thank you. Ms. Haynes?
Thank you. The applicants are requesting the change on their 1.3-acre parcel located on East Benton from general commercial to the medium-density single-family zoning district. In your packet, you'll see that I've outlined the consistency with the comprehensive plan and also outlined several goals listed in the 2005 land use plan. One of those goals encourages the maintenance and improvement of existing housing and promoting the stabilization of existing neighborhoods by addressing housing maintenance and redevelopment to prevent deterioration of existing neighborhoods and to encourage the community to reinvest in developed areas. The subject property is surrounded by medium-density single-family residential zoning to the north, the south, the east, and the west. The land uses permitted in the medium-density single-family residential zoning district include single-family dwellings, residential accessory structures, and then other uses such as golf courses, parks, playgrounds, and schools. The site is not currently served by City of Republic water and sewer. The existing residential structure has a private well and septic system. City water and sewer services are in proximity to the site. There's an 8-inch water line along York Avenue, so the applicants could request at the time of rezoning or other permitting to connect to city water. There's also a gravity sanitary sewer main which can serve the property. Both the water and sewer facilities do have the capacity to serve a residential use on the subject parcel. We do not anticipate any type of increase in traffic for our transportation facilities for this particular zoning change. There is no special flood hazard areas or floodplains on the property, and there are also no identified sinkholes. Staff has reviewed the application and believes that the rezoning from general commercial in this particular area of Brookline to medium density single family is in compliance with the trend of development in the area. It is compatible with surrounding land uses, and it is consistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, and we are recommending approval of this application.
Thank you. Any discussion from council? Seems to make perfect sense based on the surrounding land use. Okay, if there's no other discussion, please see Ms. Haynes if you have any between now and the next meeting, as it is a first read. Looks like you have one more still. Moving on to resolutions. Resolution number 19-R-25, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, approving a preliminary plat for Forest Lake Estates, a residential subdivision consisting of approximately 20.25 acres located at the 500 block South Forest Lane. Need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Haynes.
Thank you. The applicants have requested the review and approval of a preliminary plat for approximately 20.25 acres located on South Forest Lane. The preliminary plat includes 48 residential lots. The zoning of the property is the medium density single family zoning district, and it also includes streets and associated infrastructure. The preliminary plat, again, contains the 48 lots. Each lot has a minimum square footage requirement of 9,000 square feet, and the preliminary plat contains lots ranging in size from the minimum of 9,000 square feet all the way up to 32,614 square feet. The plat proposes 2 new local street connections to South Forest Lane. These 2 new street connections are approximately 200 feet apart. The new public street will serve all lots within the subdivisions. There will be no lots directly accessed off of South Forest Lane. And the construction of the development will include approximately 2,000 feet of street and sidewalk, which will be dedicated to the city upon completion of the infrastructure construction and final platting. The City of Republic Water and Sewer Service is available to the property. The lots will be served by a 10-inch connection near the intersection of the railroad and O'Neill Road. This 10-inch connection will loop through the neighborhood up to another water main connection on South Forest Lane. The looping of the water system is a requirement of the subdivision regulations, and the created looped system will create a condition in which the 1,500 gallons per minute fire flow requirement is met. The development will connect to the 8-inch gravity sewer main on South Forest Lane, and this particular main does flow directly to the wastewater treatment facility, and that facility does have the capacity to serve these 48 lots. No floodplain on the property. The property does not contain any sinkholes. And then the stormwater plan contains a stormwater basin and an overflow basin that contain all of the stormwater attributable to the development. All components of the preliminary plan have been reviewed by staff, and we are recommending approval of the preliminary plat for Forest Lake Estates.
Thank you. Any discussion from council on this resolution? Again, appears to be a proper use of land considering what's around it, so. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to resolution number 19-R-226, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing the purchase of 3 police vehicles. Need a motion and a second.
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Lieutenant Burks.
This is a resolution for the request of purchasing 3 new patrol vehicles, 2 of which would be Chevrolet Tahoes from Don Brown Chevrolet. 1 would be a Dodge Charger from Republic Ford. The total of all 3 vehicles would be $97,610. Along with this would be the safety equipment, the lights, the sirens, the camera systems. That would be $26,390 for a total of everything of $124,000. Along with your packages, you should have a picture of the new striping that we will be moving towards. This is not something we're going to stripe every vehicle. This would be, as we add vehicles, this is what they would be, what we would be going to bring forward.
Thank you. Any discussion from the council? Mr. Jones?
What is leading us in the direction away from the Explorers?
Okay. In the past, the Explorers, they were all-wheel drive, which is one of the reasons we went to them, had a little bit more room. They were significantly cheaper. This year, they raised them right about $5,000. So they're within $400 of the Chevrolet Tahoes now. We did quite a bit of research. The maintenance cost of the Tahoes seem to be lower. The resale value seems to be quite a bit higher with the Tahoes. They have more room. All around it, just all the departments we talked to said the Tahoes had been much better vehicles for them. And with the $400 price difference, it didn't make sense to stick with the Explorers anymore.
Okay. One more question. So the Charger, those have been proven to not be excellent patrol vehicles.
So they had an issue for a few years with the oil not cycling up onto the valves. That has been, so we've been told, taken care of. Again, we've reached out to several departments that are still using them, Greene County being one, and they don't currently have that problem. They're not seeing that in their newer Chargers. Along with that, the new Charger is also all-wheel drive, which would, for winter use, with one of the reasons we went with the Explorers in the first place, it would help with that. So that's what Greene County has went to mostly. They are also significantly cheaper than the SUVs, which is why we're only ordering 1 for this year to test how, we've done some research on what they're saying, but we also want to test it ourselves.
Sure.
So
Good. Thank you.
I believe they're about $8,000 a vehicle cheaper, so they're significantly cheaper.
Mr. Dyckman?
On the Tahoes, are they all-wheel drive?
They are. They're pursuit rated, so they're lower than a normal Tahoe, and they are all-wheel drive.
Thank you.
And you know the all-wheel drive is an option on the Charger.
It's fairly new.
Yeah.
Anything else from council? Appreciate the research and ready to answer those questions. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries 8-0. Okay, so we have 2 people who would like to speak on this next agenda item. I'll let you know how this will go. I'll open it up like our resolution. We will have our presentation, and then I will call you to the podium to speak. You'll have 5 minutes. I'll ask you to state your name and address clearly into the microphone. You'll have 5 minutes to speak in a professional and respectful manner, get your point across. So I will move on to resolution number 19-R-27, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing the Public Works Director to apply for a federal build grant for the purpose of constructing pedestrian and roadway improvements along Highway 60 and throughout the city. Need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. I've got a quick PowerPoint presentation. That's more for me, just to organize my thoughts. So, first thing I wanted to do is just apologize to the council. Due to the deadline, I feel like we rushed this project a little bit more than normal. We publicized on Facebook, I'm sure you know, the conceptual of the bridge, and the intent there was to get the support we need from our local legislators in the form of a letter for our application. They wanted public feedback and what the perception from our citizens was of the bridge. So that was the reason behind getting that out ahead of this council meeting, was just to kind of gauge the public feedback. So anyway, Laura, if you want to go ahead. The build grant is a replacement to what were formerly known as the Tiger Grant. A little bit different. The federal minimum request is $5 million with a maximum of $25 million per project. No more than $90 million can be awarded per state. So Republic in years prior was not considered urban. So now we fall into an urban designation because of our proximity to Springfield. So a project has to have a $5 million federal minimum. When you combine that with our local 20% match, that makes the project by itself, or in total, has to be $6.25 million in order to qualify to get an application. The applications are due Monday. Monday in November. We'll find out if we're awarded or not. It is an extremely competitive process. There's, I don't know the total projects that are submitted, but projects from every state are part of the overall, I believe it's 900 million available nationwide. So our project includes a pedestrian bridge, but also includes a pretty vast expansion to the trail network. And that's identified on the OTO's trail priority plan, similar to the major thoroughfare plan for our roadway network, but for trails. And the connection identified is from the Greenways trails where they end currently on Republic Road to our Shula Creek Trail. And I'll go through that location in another slide. Total project that we're proposing to submit for application is $7.8 million. That breakdown federally, that would be $6.2 million. Local dollars, 1.5. Part of the application allows for partnerships. So the intent would be to, if awarded, obligate the city to 20%, but also look for partners, either private or public partners, once we're awarded, to participate in that 20%. Laura, if you want to go ahead. Next one. Oh, you're already there. You're good. If awarded, we're required to begin expending funds by 2021 with full expenditure by 2026. Just a tentative process for this project would be minor expenditures in 2021 with design and right-of-way acquisition, and then tentatively begin construction on the first phase in late 2022. As far as funding goes, we have identified the Parks Fund, the Street Fund, and our Capital Improvement Sales Tax. Those funds are dedicated to infrastructure projects, or have funds dedicated to infrastructure projects like this. So I think there was maybe a little bit of confusion that of that local dollar, we would be using general fund revenue, and that's not the case. In the CIST fund, we actually identify, I think, 2 of the trail phases that we've included in this build grant. And although the pedestrian bridge itself is not identified in the trail plan, we have 2 lines on either side of 60 that meet and have to join somehow. In our opinion, a bridge is the ultimate solution to that crossing. In brief discussion with Debbie and Jared, we would begin building our cash position next year if we're awarded, and then whatever we are short at the time of the expenditure, we would look at a short-term debt. And that debt service would be paid through the Parks, the Street, and the CIS fund. The initial discussion was a 5-year term. One thing I did want to highlight before we go on to the map, through the process of the application, we have to go through what's called a benefit cost analysis. And what we do there is we have to prove that the cost or the benefits to this project outweigh the cost. And most of that is attributed to safety and economic competitiveness. And just on safety, I wanted to give you some factors. So the US DOT gives a monetary value to a fatality accident of $9.6 million. So although we've not seen a fatality involving a pedestrian along 60, I think in a 40-year evaluation, which is the period of evaluation that we'll do for this benefit cost analysis, I think that statistically it's likely given the volume of traffic and pedestrians. So that was just an important number I wanted to put out there. And then the other one, this one I found kind of intriguing, and I didn't know about this until we started this process. They also assign a value to delay of commuters. So they give it to you in an hour, but if you broke it down to a second, every second of delay that we add to Highway 60 is valued at $118 because of the volume of traffic. So for 30,000 cars, if we add any kind of infrastructure that delays them by a second, we're costing $118 a day by DOT's mathematics, I guess. This map kind of identifies the features of the project that we're doing in the vicinity of Highway 60. And also I want to point out that it somewhat alludes to the layout of the improvements at 174 and 60. MoDOT has shared those with us. They are conceptual, what we would call probably a 20% design, but you do see that those improvements that the commission will approve on the 11th, the intent is to bring that intersection back together, add turn lanes on 174. So there's going to be an excess amount of right-of-way, if you can picture it in front of Walgreens, the bank, and Walmart. So some of the trail features that we've included use up that right-of-way and give it a little bit more of an appealing use than just a space. We make connections from the trail on 174 where it ends currently near the library over to the intersection of 174 and 60, and then it comes back and joins the bridge at Hines, also where the sidewalk ends. You'll also see a connection from the sidewalk in front of Walgreens. Actually, I think it ends currently at 174 and 60. That would bring it down and then down along Hines and connect it to the Schuler Creek Trail. I think I got everything. Oh, and we connect the sidewalk north from the intersection of 174 and 60 up to Hamilton, to the light there at Lowe's and Arby's. This one's a little bit hard to see, but this is the trail investment study that OTO did. These are the identified trail priorities for the region. You can see that we make a connection from the Schuler Creek Trail to the battlefield, north to the high school, and then along Republic Road to where the Greenways Trail currently ends, just under the bridge there. Overall, it's about 7 miles of additional trail, and it gives the region, or it gives Republic the opportunity for a continuous 20-mile trail asset. Let's see. I think that's it. Do you want to go to the last one? Okay, so created a little bit of a buzz with this. It's conceptual. I want to hit that a couple times. It is conceptual. This is not a design. But it gives a kind of perspective on the overall theme of the project, and it relates the bridge itself to some features that we're familiar with. If you just click on that, it should go into motion. And those are the conceptual improvements at 174 and 60 as well. It's not identified here, but MoDOT, one of their comments was they would like to see a fence in the median so in this concrete in the middle of the road, their comment was we needed a fence, and I think I forgot to hit that on the actual overall map, but some fencing and some other features that would deter people from not using the bridge. One of the other big concerns is we're gonna put it there, but no one's gonna use it. The way that we address that is to, not that people couldn't still cross the road, but we make it harder for them to cross where it's not safe. The last thing I want to mention is that originally, in the scope of the project, we approached a conversion of the Hines and 60 intersection to a right-in, right-out only. And it's something we brought up to MoDOT in the past, just to get the conversation started about what kind of improvements can we make to the Hines intersection that will help ease congestion. MoDOT didn't want to support the right-in, right-out as a part of this build grant. They want to pursue further impact studies to other signals in proximity, just so we can show what those benefits are, as well as engage the public, identify the alternate routes, and show that there's actually probably not a delay by doing that, and that the overall net gain in relieving congestion is better. So it's something we'll still pursue, but it's not going to be a part of this project. That's it.
Okay, so before we move on to questions, comments from council, I'd like to get our citizens up here to speak. So first, we do have one marked as against, Ralph. Sir, I don't want to say your last name wrong. Is it Belitz? Belitz, okay. If you would, just state your address for us, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
1466 South Natchez Road. I'm not really against the bridge. I'm for it. But the picture I just seen and the picture in the paper, how is a person in a wheelchair going to get up to that bridge?
Through the elevator.
An elevator's a waste of money. You can have elevators on both ends.
Mhm.
This is what I'm interested in. Elevators take maintenance. I would think that you could save a lot of money by a wraparound type steel bridge that goes up. I've seen them in a lot of places. But we don't need something real fancy. We need something that's workable. Plus the elevator, you're gonna have to watch for muggings. What do you call it when they write on the walls? Stuff like that, you know, I think it's a bad idea. I think it'd be better off to have an open ramp up to it where people in a wheelchair or crippled could get up there without taking an elevator. It just looks like very wasteful to me. Sure, it's pretty. Another thing that I didn't notice on this, but maybe I didn't see good, but there's no screening over the bridge so kids can throw rocks off of there or whatever, you know. You gotta look at this stuff nowadays. These kids, they're crazy. They just, but that's my opinion. Like I said, I'm in favor of the bridge. I think it's a great idea, but I think you can come up with a better plan. That's it.
Thank you, sir. And now, is it Mr. Tim Pryor?
Yes.
If you'd please come to the podium and state your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Fred Tim Pryor, 269 North Adair Drive. I just moved to Republic about, 7, 8 months ago, give or take. Got a house here. Love the community, by the way. Just trying to get involved. And when I heard about this, my biggest concern was the funding, which I do believe he expressed and explained. I'd like to hear more about, I think you talked about possibly others coming in, venturing in for capital, and how that would work. biggest concern was when we had the last election with the funding. We're understaffed, the way I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're understaffed on police officers, we're understaffed on firemen. And that is one of my biggest concerns because of the safety aspect of that. We can talk about how much MoDOT will evaluate on an accident for a child, which would be tremendous. But also if somebody's house burns and you've got a family of 4 and they lose everything in their lives, that's going to be a catastrophic loss too. So I believe it was expressed very well about the funding, just not tweaked 100%, but I understand where you're going from because you're trying to get that. So my biggest concern was to come and voice funding aspects because of the general revenue fund with the, we just heard the chief of police ask for more vehicles. Well, we all know that costs money, we need them, but we also need to staff the people that are responsible for that. I'm not against the bridge at all. I think it'd be a nice focal point. I love the way the community is growing and things that are being done. I like the people really well. I just wanted to try to get a little bit more involved in the community. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely, thank you. And to be clear, this, what we're doing right now, the council is considering whether or not to apply, to submit the application. If we were to apply, and if the funding was approved through the build grant, then at that point, we would have to have another discussion on funding, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor, but
Sir.
I want to clarify, I appreciate your comment, because that was the greatest concern, is that we would not spend a dime of general revenue fund that would take away from anything that we had in that ballot measure is still on the table, and this project does not take away any funding from those issues.
That is the way I understood it also after.
Very good.
hearing it proposed.
Okay, thank you. Now, open it up to council for discussion, comments. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I have a question, Andrew, I share some of the same concerns from, the project looks phenomenal. Good job to you and your team on putting this together. And what I'm impressed with as much as the crosswalk is also the adding to the trail system and the benefits to those that would get out and utilize that. That's great. What led you down the path, or is we thinking about the elevator concept instead of a long, low-pitch ramp?
Well, and I'll start with it's a concept. The elevators shown here aren't something that we're committed to. In the design process, we would vet benefit costs. The thing about ramps or a spiral ramp, they're hard to make ADA compliant. So the cost associated with a ramp that would be ADA compliant can sometimes be prohibitive as compared to an elevator, compared to the space that it takes up. But we're not committed to either one. The design, for one thing, has to be vetted through MoDOT. It crosses in their right-of-way. Some of their concerns, initial concerns with the concept as shown, were the same as the first gentleman. It would require a screening. That's just a regulation enforced by MoDOT that would prevent anybody tossing or jumping or anything like that. There's height requirements that they were concerned with. So those are conceptual, and through the design process, I think we would vet a lot of that. Now, I guess we're not committed to one way or the other.
And I understand the cost aspect of making a ramp, having to utilize the space required to make a ramp ADA compliant is big, and maybe a larger initial investment, but you have far less maintenance and upkeep over the course of the lifetime of this. So that's a concern that I have. And again, this is just for application for the funds. And then
Yeah, absolutely. We think we have a good application. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. The odds are slim. So.
Mr. Russell?
Thank you, sir. Your presentation said it's a very competitive process. Like, how many applications do they get? Do you have those numbers? Is this something that we've applied for in the past and come close to?
We have applied for it when it was a Tiger grant. Different scenario. We applied for a much larger project, 25 million, I think. But at that time, you could apply for 100% funding. So we didn't have to come up with a local match. So 25 million might as well, because it's all federal dollars. In this scenario, when you consider the local match, we have to weigh benefit cost, of what are we getting in return for our investment with the federal dollars. I don't know how many applicants there are. What I do know, talking to the consultant we deal with just on the conceptual, is that entities or local agencies spend thousands of dollars on their applications. A lot of times they have a consultant prepare them. An example that we're using that was prepared by Great River made it to the final cut, I guess, if you want to call it that. It takes a lot of information and a lot of forethought, probably more than we thought. We've spent a lot of time determining how many seconds do you get back by taking away a pedestrian crossing. It's been fun, but there are projects, the ones that we have seen that have been awarded often are fully designed, sometimes half funded or fully funded. This is just the federal dollars just accelerate them. So I think based on what we heard on our review of our last application, the selection criteria starts with projects that have, say, 50% funding already available. They have all the right-of-way, the design's already done. There's a lot of projects like that where you just gain what I call they're shelf ready. So it's like we award it to you. It's either already started or you're going to knock it out in a
Gotcha.
Mr. Self?
So during the school year, one of the major complaints is the kids running across 60 Highway. Not necessarily even at the crosswalk or what have you that we currently have. This feature, I would hope, would be almost attractive to them to use that as opposed to running across. It doesn't eliminate them still running across the Highway 60, but one of the largest complaints that I see or that I hear is based on those kids running across there. So,
And that's somewhat the origination of, hey, we need a bridge. Or, I mean, there's a lot of ways to get people across safely, a bridge, a tunnel. We need something that takes the traffic element away from it.
and I know that this is like a time crunch deal, so I want to say I appreciate you getting everything packaged up nicely, packaged concept. I get it. That's a conceptual piece. So, but at any rate, having something, a design of something to present is better than nothing to see with this application.
That was our thought. Give it a picture to go with.
Mr. Bashir?
I think I'm like everyone else that's spoken tonight. I'm not against the bridge. We may need to look at something different than what we have proposed here. My main concern is funding. I noticed you mentioned about the funds coming from the street department. Can you tell me how many miles of city street last year were resurfaced?
Last year, we did not do any resurfacing.
Okay.
All of our funds are tied up in Hines and Oakwood and the roundabout.
This could not help but impact that, correct?
Yes.
If money is coming from the street department,
Right.
at the same time, the street department funds are used, for a bridge. I know a lot of the streets in Republic are not good. I mean, not good. And that would be my main concern, is it's taking funds from a department that right now is lacking as far as the funds they need to have the streets really drivable and to be safe.
Today it does. The discussion and the timing, in 2023, we regained approximately $350,000 in STP funds. We expire a $80,000 debt for the debt service of the Walmart pavement. So today, in this year's budget, tremendous impact, less of an impact in 4 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson and then Mr. Dagnan.
Okay. I think the bridge is a good idea. It's for the safety of the kids. But having said that, I got a phone call and they're wanting to know, does not the school provide buses for the kids that lives on the east side of 60?
I'm sure that they do. I don't know if there's a rule in Republic about a proximity that Charlie maybe can answer that better than me.
I I better not say anything other than my positive. I think there is though,
I think
on
there,
the distance.
yeah, we could probably find a better number to say this amount of children are in this proximity of their school.
Well, having said that, kids, the biggest part of them's not gonna ride the school bus, even though it's available.
Sure, yeah, I can't remember the count that you did for what schools and stuff.
Yes, approximately 40 pedestrians cross the road between 2:30 and 4:30 on a school day. 38 of them were middle school age children, over half of which did not use the crosswalk.
Thank you. Mr. Dyckman?
On the funding, after our conversation today, that would be spent out of like streets and so on, the money that you were talking about that's from tax initiatives and different things, that's restricted funds, can those funds be used for street, just street repairs or whatever? Or are they for something more like this?
Anything in the street fund absolutely could be used for street repair, and we budget approximately 200,000 annually for overlays. The reason we didn't do that this year or last year were the two larger projects that we're doing that we're matching with local dollars.
But they could, so it, of course, my concern is like everybody else, it's the funding, and, if it worked the way you were speaking, as far as today, what actual cash outlay we would have, or potentially have, is a lot smaller amount of dollars, that could probably be budgeted in the length of time you're talking. That was just a question of if those restricted funds, could be used for other street projects.
And I hated to speak to how we would obligate funds because that's something that would take council approval.
Sure.
I think if awarded, you would see us come back with a recommendation that said, this is the smartest way to outlay these funds, and that's either a debt service, say, of 20,000. Each fund is 50. I wish Debbie was here because I'm not the local person, but we talked about it and we felt comfortable with the CIPs that we have today and this project.
Mr. Franklin?
How long is this bridge expected to last, the lifespan of the bridge?
Most bridges' lifespan is 50 years.
50 years? And at the City of Republic, we're responsible for the maintenance of this bridge and the passage of this bridge, or would that be MoDOT?
It would be the city.
The city?
Mr. Jones, did you have something else?
It stated that there were about 38 crossings during the time frame that you're talking that didn't use the crosswalk?
No, 38 were middle school age children, approximately half of them did not use the crosswalk. Some of them did use it, but a lot of them did not, they just ran across 60.
I'm curious, where about on 60 were they actually crossing that?
Between Hines and approximately McDonald's, I couldn't tell exactly from where I was sitting. And one of the aspects of this project would be to add fencing along the middle school property to prevent kids just walking out of the middle school and walking across McDonald's property and crossing. It would force them down to at least Hines Street to make that crossing.
Okay.
That was a concern because this doesn't address it without doing some additional work.
It does, yeah, and I didn't highlight that on the map, but that's one of the features we talked about with the school, and I don't think that, given the complaints we received from the business owners, that it would be a bad thing to have the fence between the school and those businesses that funnel the pedestrian traffic down to Hines, and then ultimately the bridge. And with the bridge in place, we would take away the pedestrian button and crossing there. Not that you couldn't still cross there, but we would, I guess, persuade the pedestrian traffic to the bridge.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Franklin.
With the extension of the sidewalk down 174, I noticed it goes underneath the railroad bridge. Is that a major concern with the passage of under there and having enough room for that trail, or is the existing bridge allowing enough room?
Yeah, if you can picture the existing bridge column, it's very near to the road, and then the grade slopes back to the bridge abutment. So what that would look like is a excavation vertical MSE wall with, I don't know the exact dimension, but there's enough space.
Some sort of a concrete
Yeah,
wall
you-
that'll still shore the bridge and.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else from the council? Ms. Poole?
I've been contacted about the location of the bridge, more than one person. And at the time, I did not know that it was by a grant. But if we get the grant, does it have to be built where we're showing it?
No, right now, everything on there is conceptual, so I believe.
Yeah, the location presented is what presents, that makes the most sense to us right now. I would love to tell you that we could put it at McDonald's in Flat Creek, but there's just simply not the space that we would need to do it.
Well, again, thank you all for the work on this. We already know that we've kicked the can down the road on a lot of things. Fortunately, we've been able to be pretty aggressive with our debt payments, so a lot of those things are going to be paid off, like the Walmart situation that would free up some of those funds. And is it right that 70% of the school-age kids live on the opposite side of 60 from the school?
Just 70% in general of our population.
Okay.
Is on one side of 60.
And another thing was we're not slowing down traffic. We've talked and talked and talked about Highway 60 and the 113% capacity. We're not putting in the lights on the road, which stops traffic or slows down traffic away from a signalized intersection, which would be the exact wrong thing to do, because it would continue to slow traffic. It would then entice them to cross in a location that's not signalized, making it even less safe. So we can't control the way funds were spent in the past. We can only look at the way they are in the future. So I think we're pretty lucky to have the group we do, and thank you for looking at a creative way. The other thing is this grant is already funded. It's already in their budget. So if the City of Republic doesn't receive this grant, someone else is going to. It's not like those funds just go back into the coffers and the taxpayers never pay it. Quite honestly, the taxpayers have already paid it, the grant money. So, Mr. Cameron, did you have something?
Well, I just wanted to elaborate, Charlie, on the question about the street resurfacing and what that question about the budget is, because that was the question I had with staff, who was just talking about the project. And I think that what's probably been missing in the discussions of the budgets is the history of the street fund and what STP funds mean to our community. And so when the city in 2012 agreed to do Hines and Oakwood, they leveraged their future plus borrowed $600,000 to do that project. So we're not only leveraged out to 2023 with the STP funds from OTO, we borrowed $600,000 to do those projects. So while I don't believe this council probably knew the ramifications of all of that was being presented, that $1.2 million or roughly at that ballpark is being leveraged, and we're paying that till 2023 till we start getting our money back. That's why when we were talking about this project, saying it would free up our cash position, plus that $200,000, we'd be looking at $700,000 to $800,000 a year in 2023 that we do not have now, because we're still paying for the Walmart entrance, and I would suspect that's probably 7-8 years ago. And so every street project that's of significance had to be financed to some way versus cash flowed. And so I think a lot of that is why we'd like to be doing those projects. Like you say, I agree wholeheartedly. We got a lot of side streets that need serious attention, which is what we included in the ballot as well. It's just, we've got to get to those things, but really in 2023, to answer those questions for everyone that's asking, that's probably when we're gonna have funding to actually do resurfacing again. That's just a long time for one project to be accomplished in town, but that's the choices that was made, and that's the decision that we're working towards to get to. But I wanna be clear that we didn't spend that money on projects like this. It's just,
Right, I just.
okay, but it's a very valid concern that it's like, how do we get to those projects now that we need to do? It'll be very beneficial to get our STP funds back into the community for what we can do, but we are getting other projects done.
Okay. Remember, this is a resolution, and the resolution is to submit the application, nothing further. Everything is conceptual, and no funding has been itemized or set aside for this right now. This is only to allow them to submit the application. So, is there anything else before we move on?
Mr. Mayor, I do
Sir,
have one
Mr.
quick
Franklin.
question. So even with us only contributing the 20%, once the design phase and a final product is decided, do we still have the final say on whether that moves forward, or will we be forced into anything through MoDOT?
We're still the project owner, so everything, although that we'd have to comply with their regulations.
Right.
If color, shape, elevators, no elevators, that's all determined by us.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
It also suggests, though, that we have time to go looking for additional dollars from outside sources to participate. That's right. Looking for other partners.
Yeah, you can identify partners, I should have said this before, you can identify partners in the application. What I found was when I looked for partners, it's hard to sell them something that's theoretical. It's hard for them to obligate funds on the award you didn't get, which I understand.
Okay, a lot of discussion. So we'll move on now to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0 to apply for the grant. Moving on to reports from staff. Mr. Cameron.
We got one more resolution.
Oh, yeah, got this.
That took so long, I thought we were done. Okay, resolution number 19-R-28, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing the purchase of waterline materials for the OTC project. Need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second, Mr. Nelson.
This one's a lot simpler.
Good.
We budgeted for this project. We already awarded a material supplier, so this is just authorizing the purchase of materials. I think just over 53,000 to get that water line put in from where it exists on Miller to Frisco Boulevard, just past OTC.
Okay, discussion from council. Everybody's talked out. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries 8-0. Now, we will go on to reports from staff. Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Andrew alluded to in his presentation, on June 11th, the Highway Commission will be considering the 6174 intersection improvements. So it's already passed the OTO Executive Board or the board collectively. That was recommended to the Highway Commission. So hopefully on July 11th, we will receive the funding for that project. And hopefully in 2020, we'll start construction on that project. So I would ask, we will announce that as soon as we find out. But I will tell you, with that construction project, is going to come a lot of logistics, a lot of communication that's going to take place. But it'll be well worth it to see the improvements at that intersection. So looking forward to that project. And I want to thank the staff for being very tenacious and working alongside myself with OTO and presenting all the information and getting that done. I think having the environmental and the right-of-way already in place put us in a very favorable position. So I appreciate OTO in that, and as well as MoDOT. Sometimes we can be a little bit critical of some of the stuff that's taken place, but at the same time, I'm really thankful that they were considered to that project. I want to thank the city staff for the application on the build grant. I want to thank the mayor for his efforts, the OTO for their efforts. I believe that we've received support letters from Congressman Billy Long. We're going to be receiving one, I believe, from Governor Parson, thanks to the mayor's effort. Senator Blunt and Hawley are also providing letters of support for the project, which is critical to that nature. But I appreciate the work that goes on and the work that the mayor has done, staff, and OTO to get that moving forward. So it was nice to already have Congressman Long's letter and already able to have that submitted because we were under such a tight time crunch. And I know the staff has put in an enormous amount of hours. Garrett, you did not mention, Garrett Brickner, you did not even mention that the videos, the cameras that you were setting up on poles, and he would send us these videos that we could watch time lapses of kids bolting across there, and it's just dangerous. It's sad. I mean, all it would take is one accident. People would be saying, listen, what are you doing to address that situation? And so I appreciate you being ahead of it, at least looking for alternative ways to fund it. I want to commend everybody on Have a Blast. Jennifer, to you, Jared, everyone that is participating in, all of our public safety staff, public works, everyone that volunteers, that helps out, all the volunteers that we still need for next year. So if you're thinking about a volunteer opportunity, there's always the Mud Run, there's always the Tiger Try, and there's always Have a Blast next year. But I think that this was the work that was put in this year was sensational. I think it's what I love the most about Republic. When people ask me, why Republic is because it's very rare when you go into a community anymore and you see a sense of community in those type of events. And when you see people crowded together, just being outside their house, not on social media necessarily, just having a great time together and being a community. And sure, there's areas we can do better. I know the train, I appreciate our public safety staff working with the train engineers to stop the train so that they can do the fireworks show. And so there's a lot of coordinating that's going on, and they stopped that train. Problem is, right after it's done, so I'm going to commend them, and then I'm going to criticize them. So, but they start that train, and so obviously it backed up traffic a little bit. So appreciate the staff. I really do. I said this last year. I'm going to say it again. If you go out there at 7 o'clock the next morning, you know who's out there? It's that same staff cleaning up the property, getting it back into a useful state. After they've been out there till midnight, 1 o'clock on that night, away from their families to some extent. And so I really appreciate the work that goes on by the staff all the time and what they do and the services they provide. That was a great event. So congratulations, kudos, and thank you. So today there's been a lot of discussion regarding the debris dump. And so the conversation where the city had shut down that facility. And so it did spark some ideas today during our ELT meeting. I'm looking forward to, in about September, bringing in some ideas as how to collectively address that, not only that, but the recycling center in our community. These are services that I am familiar with and communities to provide, but just like the mention was discussed, when you're deciding whether to have a $50,000 recycling facility or having police officers, we're going to have police officers. And it's not because we don't value recycling, it's just you've got to choose by which meets the need of what you believe is the biggest priority at the time. And whether it's staffing a debris area with a full-time staff member, taking it out of the general fund and providing that to the community, we would like to do that. But at the same time, you cannot take away from other critical funds that generate those opportunities. So instead of just saying, hey, too bad, we can't do it, staff got together today and started working on ideas that we could present to this council and present to the community as a consideration, because we also have the citywide cleanup that's it was $40,000, and considering the things that we're having to cut to balance the budget, you got to consider all those things. But we also want to come up with solutions and ideas of how to maintain ways to keep our community clean and the methods to do that. So we had some ideas that came up today that I was very appreciative of. So I'm looking forward in September to having that discussion for consideration with council and it talks about service providers. I know that's been a contentious point. We're not suggesting anything. We're kind of brainstorming the idea. So we're not just going to say, hey, we're shutting it all down. We don't have it. We're going to come up with creative ways that we believe that can be funded and provide those to the council and possibly provide those to the community if that's so this council's desire. Lastly, and I'm somewhat reluctant, but we talk about that we're going to be very transparent. I want to be transparent about a situation that's occurring in our community right now that was brought to my attention yesterday, and I don't want to draw a red flag. So I want to preface it that I'm not trying to raise a red flag, but at the same time, when you notify our public safety officials of a concern, and it's with the Magellan pipeline. So they had a tank. The summary of it is they have those tanks have floating lids. On one of the 6 tanks, the floating lid has become wedged, and so they are operating on a procedure at this time to drain that tank. It holds about 1.7 million gallons of fuel. They're transferring the fuel out of that tank. What is it in the tank is obviously a lot of vapor. Any type of spark, static electricity could obviously cause an unwarranted situation. The idea there would be it'd blow the cap, so I'm not telling you that it's going to blow, but I'm going to tell you that there's the potential that's there. And so anytime that someone notifies our public safety of the potential, I believe it's our responsibility to notify the residents adjacent to the property of the potential that is being discussed around them. And so while you don't want to say, well, there's this get ready, this is going to happen, I still believe we have a responsibility to notify this council, to notify our community, at least notify those residents in those areas. Because when we're talking about identifying a half-mile blast area, what would happen with shrapnel from the tank, when you're trying to outline what could happen in this scenario, I think they have a right to be notified as well as you do, so that there's not some like, hey, what's going on out there? They do have their engineers in from Kansas City and Tulsa. They're monitoring the air 24 hours a day, so if there's any inclination of a strong amount of gas and oxygen, obviously, and they're coordinating with the rail, certain things they can and can't do. And so I just want to make you aware of the situation that's there and the letters that are going to be going out from my office tomorrow to the neighbors in that area of the situation. Hopefully that there's no problem, but at the same time, I feel like we have an obligation to notify those residents of the potential that exists. And so What they're gonna do, the idea is to cut a hole, a hole inside the tank to release the vapor. And they'll be cutting a 5-foot door at the bottom with a water chisel saw to cut that out. Go in there and they're gonna replace whatever's causing the wedge in that tank and repair it. So they're very old, they're older model tanks. And so obviously, but they've got plenty of engineers. There's people that repair these things all the time. But if there's a potential, and it was my mother that lived next to it, she's getting a phone call. So I feel like that's our obligation, our responsibility as a community to notify them. And so I don't wanna draw a bunch of unwarranted news to it, but at the same time, it should value and respect, or warrant our, attention to the matter. So I wanted to bring that to you. And, that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
All right. Again, the Have a Blast celebration, that is amazing, and I know that sometimes people will be critical of everything or anything that we could do. Facebook unfortunately gives us an opportunity sometimes to speak our mind about things we don't like, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. But I heard a lot of comments about it being one of the best ones we've ever had, just the way the layout was, the quality of the fireworks, and the community. So, great job. I think out of 23, is that the 23rd?
Yep.
A lot of people were saying it was the best one, and there were a lot of people that have been there for all 23 of them. So, the other thing is on the bridge for me, something that we don't talk about is, while we need to discuss where the money would come from if that happened. We're not going to try to figure out how that happens right now. We also need to remember that we have been very aggressive with paying off our long-term debt obligations. And so we have paid somewhere around $6 million in debt off since 2017. A lot of cities, counties, and states are going into debt, and we've paid off around $6 million in debt. So there's also the opportunity for, to keep on our payment schedule, but maybe not be as aggressive with the debt payments for that time frame to fix, or to pay for that. So we've been very aggressive with our debt payments, so I just want to make sure everybody knows we're all the time you hear how we're spending too much money, and maybe we are in some places. I can't tell you 100%, but we're paying off debt. I can tell you that for sure. So I'll turn it over. Anything else from the council? Mr. Franklin.
Just same for me. Thank you very much for Have a Blast. That was awesome. Great show. Overconquered some of my fears. I got to spend a little time in the bounce area. That was a little intimidating, but that was a lot of fun. When that train came through, I mean, just goosebumps. That's kind of the small town, just a perfect picture for our town. So very appreciative. Thank you for everybody at the presentations this evening as well. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anything else from the council? Favorite part of the night? At this point, I ask to go into executive session. No further action other than announcing adjournment by the mayor shall take place after an executive session that is scheduled as the last matter on the agenda, unless otherwise stated on the agenda or as allowed per RSMO 610.02. Tonight, we will be discussing RSMO 610.021.3, hiring, firing, promotion, or disciplining personnel. That is a closed session, closed vote, and a closed record. Get a motion and a second to go into executive session.
Motion.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Dykeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Self.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Russell.
Aye.
Councilmember Poole.
Aye.
Councilmember Bashirs.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson.
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin.
Aye.
Motion carries 8-0. We will take a 5-minute recess, adjourn regular session, and go into executive session. Thank you all for coming.
Water chisel cutters as well.
I couldn't remember what it was. Water cannon. Isn't it?
Water jet.
Water jet.
Water chisel cannon.
The water chisel cutter.
If you can cut with water, that's just
I forgot what it is.
It's a skill saw. That's all it is.